This is Football at 4.
Josh Hedrick filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, it's Adam Caplan pinch hitting for Jeff Mosher here on Wednesday edition of Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Of course, the podcast is wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music. YouTube Music got this whole section now of podcasting stuff. I think I might be better than Spotify's layout. But anyway, I'm not paid to endorse that. But still, you search Inside the Birds on there, Inside the Birds on YouTube, as well as their Patreon account for all the great insights. Adam Caplan is back here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam, how you doing today?
Josh, I am well. I hope you're doing well. The weather, well, it's still cold. But the good news is that the Eagles had a walkthrough today, right? So this starts the practice window. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Today's a walkthrough. Tomorrow they'll have their normal practice, which is the longest of the week, and then they have their Friday tune-up practice, which is generally around an hour. Saturday walkthrough and Sunday game here at 3 Eastern for the second straight week. They're playing at 3 p.m., which is good. It's good to keep the continuity. The Eagles have not been on a flight in 2 months. It's kind of amazing to me, Josh, that's the case. But it is. The last time they flew was November 23rd when they're flying out to Los Angeles to face the Rams, who they just beat last Sunday. So that's where that is at. Now, the Eagles have not released their injury report. Nick Sirianni did say that QuinyonMitchell would be at practice day, and so would JalenHurts. Now, again, they only had a walkthrough, so we'll see how they're listed. And what it is when you have a walkthrough, Josh, they'll list it as of if they were having a normal practice, what they would have done today. It's called the estimated practice report, which the league put out about 15 years ago. They started changing the injury report, so that is that. But they did have a couple of interesting transactions. Now, the one that I've done reporting on this guy over the years, Cam Irving, a former first-round pick, I believe with the Browns. He's a kind of a journeyman tackle guard. He's actually played center, Josh.
Yep.
So he could play a variety of positions. This is a really smart move because, look, if somebody gets hurt, at least you have experience where you could go in and play a backup role, and they'll get him through the practice today, and they'll see what happens. We talked about Britton Covey, that he was eligible to start practicing. Well, he started working with the team today. They activated him into the 21-day window. And they also released, the Eagles did, KJ Henry, and also they signed Nick Muse to the practice squad, who certainly would not be. He's what we call a Y tight end. He's more of an inline tight end. The Eagles have been kind of light at tight end a little bit. So with the C.J. Uzomah injury, so you can understand why they did that. But again, they're back to their normal practice week as they get. This is the first day that they get started to prepare for those Washington Commanders who will be here on Sunday.
By the way, Cam Irving won a Super Bowl with the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs. So.
Did he? Oh, there you go. You go.
Yeah, I looked up while we were talking. He started 8 games that season. So.
Did he start 8? Yeah, he's a guy who was really overdrafted by the Browns in 2015. He was a first rounder.
Yep.
What happened was he could never find a home. I remember talking to the Browns about that. Oh, it's interesting. Speaking of the Browns and the 2015 team, we're having that offensive coordinator, John D. Filippo, tonight for Patreon. We should mention that. Patreon.com/InsideTheBirds. And I'm telling you, man, we're expecting probably one of the biggest turnouts, and we'll get into it. But the members take it over. We just moderate. They ask the questions, and they have conversations with John, so we look forward to doing that tonight. But, yeah, so Josh, here's the thing. Let's move forward here. The Eagles have the injury issues we know about QuinyonMitchell with that shoulder injury. He's just got to get through it. He believes he's going to play. I know the Eagles are optimistic, as I understand, that he can play. Then JalenHurts with that left knee issue. What we don't know, and just to move this conversation you and I had yesterday forward, is we don't know about his ability to run. Like, that's obviously part of his game, but also just to be able to scramble and get out of the way. And they're not going to know that until he starts working in practice. So tomorrow's the real practice, the first practice of the week, and we'll learn more tomorrow about it.
And, of course, the first practice, even though it is a walkthrough, is the first look ahead officially to the Commanders on Sunday. So, Adam, let's start. You mentioned JalenHurts. He was at the walkthrough. So, Philadelphia, they've played Washington in their defense twice this year. Both of those games, not surprising, Saquon had 147 and 150 rushing yards. So, are there any differences between when Philadelphia faced the Washington D, their regular season, and now in the postseason?
Yeah, Jonathan Allen, their star defensive tackle, he missed one of those games because he was coming back from a partially torn pectoral muscle. So he's back. Johnny Newton, who filled in for him, did a great job in the game in Washington, or actually I should say Landover, Maryland, to be exact. Newton now is their third defensive tackle. We'll start with their defense versus the Eagles' offense, just in terms of matchups and what the Eagles need to do to win. So if you look at Washington's defensive front, they rotate 8 players. Dante Fowler, they're a 43 front with certain different looks, kind of some of the Seattle looks that the head coach Dan Quinn runs. But it's Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, who had 2 sacks against the Lions last week. Cleveland Farrell, I'll tell you what, look, he was overdrafted by the Raiders, clearly in 2019. But he's been a serviceable veteran. He's their third end. They use Jalen Holmes has been sort of a journeyman. And then their top defensive tackles, I mentioned Johnny Newton. And then if you really follow NFL college football, you might remember Sheldon Day, who actually I mentioned Temple the other day. No, he went to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame,
played against Temple. Yeah, in fact, I remember watching him. He's a good player. Unfortunately, he's been hurt a lot, but he's a former fourth-rounder for the Jaguars. So they have a really good 8-man rotation. There's no question about it. They're not easy to run on. Now, Deron Payne, he's playing with this dislocated finger, which he showed. Actually, I'm pretty certain he put it within the last 10 days. He put it on Twitter. So someone showed it to me. But Johnny Newton is the guy who's really explosive off the bench, so the Eagles will have to be ready for him. And then at linebacker, a favorite of ours, Frankie Luvo. Now, I know the Eagles fans are mad at him for the concussion we know about in when they played Washington last time. But the guy's a fantastic football player. He's one of the most unique linebackers in the National Football League. He could be a nickel linebacker, use him as a pass rusher. Bobby Wagner is their Mike linebacker. Yeah, they're a big nickel team. They'll play some dime, but they'll play big nickel. And on the back end, man, this has surprised me. Mike Sainristil, number 0. Talking to Washington, they really drafted him to be a nickel defender, but they're not using him in that way. Noah Igbohagany, a former first-round pick, Josh, of the Dolphins, is their nickel defender who really bounced around. Dallas, he didn't play well. Miami didn't play well. He was overdrafted by Miami, but he's found a home. And Quan Martin, who's terrific, he played nickel last year. He's a safety now. And Marshawn Lattimore comes over from New Orleans, and we know about the hamstring problem. But this is a really well-coached unit by Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., who both came over from Dallas. Dan still calls the defense, as I understand it. Cliff Kingsbury, we'll talk about him in a minute. But this is a very well-managed defense, and they're better in the secondary. They've gotten better in the secondary. Ben St. Juste, who's a tall corner. If you follow college football, this guy was a big-time corner out of the University of Minnesota, over 6'2", but he got kind of benched. Sainristil took his job, and that's kind of the way they're going. And Michael Davis is their fourth corner. He used to start for the Chargers. He's been around the league a long time, so they're pretty deep. And Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin are their safeties. They have a great front, great coaching, and they've got some depth too.
Adam, just before we finish up with the defense, just a quick question on what you were saying about Dan Quinn and the defense. How much do you think this defense has evolved? Because I feel like when you look at the season as a whole for Washington, they had some rough games, right? Like the Bengals game, they allowed a ton of points to Joe Burrow and all them, whereas the Eagles slowed down Joe Burrow. Do you think Washington's defense might be better now than they were during the course of the season?
I would, because to get Jonathan Allen back, remember Marshawn Lattimore, he took a while to actually play for them after the trade.
Yeah, it was over a month.
Yes, exactly, Josh. So his hamstring issue is calmed down. I'm stunned that, number one, Noah Igbohagany has worked out as a nickel. Now, teams go after him. The Eagles went after him in that game in week 16, but he's kind of held up. Now, depending on the state of Hurts' knee and how they want to attack, because the Eagles played a lot of 11 personnel in the last game, this is probably a defense you want to spread them out, go after number 25, St. Juste, when he comes in. He got benched. They will rotate their safeties a little bit. Quan Martin, I mentioned Jeremy Chin, by the way. I'm talking to Washington, he's done really well. And then Percy Butler's their third safety. So they rotate the safeties a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. This is a really good front, well managed. So you're asking me, how are they better? Getting Jonathan Allen back, I think settling down their secondary has really helped them. they have this great rotation, which we talked about. They're a good defense, but they're not elite. You can throw against them. You saw the Eagles move the ball fairly well against them, even after Hurts got hurt. Kenny Pickett did a yeoman's job in that game. Let's not forget. So it's whether you can protect. The Eagles, the last two games, they had 3 or 4 plays where the offensive line simply just did not block as well as they would have liked. Now, last week, Greg Cosell told us last night with our Patreon members that there were just some times when the offensive lineman could not get good footing. He said it was very, very clear, so keep that in mind.
Talk with Adam Caplan at Caplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Download, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You mentioned Cliff Kingsbury earlier. He has done an incredible job, Adam, with this offense. Jaden Daniels, a rookie quarterback, and I know people are giving Jaden Daniels a lot of credit, and he deserves it. But tell the audience about what made what Cliff Kingsbury did this year so dangerous.
Yeah, I love the way that he moves guys around. So Terry McLaurin, I'm told, when he first got there, he only liked to play one side. So what Cliff has done is, and he's been willing to use a little bit more 12 personnel than he usually does. He's been a big spread guy, some 10 personnel, which are 4 receivers, and a lot of 11. But he's been willing to do some 11, some 10, some 12 personnel, with Zach Ertz and John Bates as their wide tight end, number 87. 86, our old friend Zach Ertz is their move tight end. Ben Sinnott, their second-round pick out of Kansas State, barely plays. They don't know what he is yet. They've got to figure out whether he's a tight end or an H-back, but that'll be in future years. But I like the way that Cliff Kingsbury's used personnel. He's kind of evolved a little bit as a play caller, and I thought he's done a good job. Their quarterback design run game has been phenomenal. And I got to tell you, Josh, I was wrong about this offensive line. I'm stunned that it's held up. Now, here's the point, though. They just lost Sam Cosmi, the right guard, until probably mid-season next year due to that torn ACL. Biotish has done okay at center. Nick Allegretti, from what I understand, they've been pleasantly surprised by him, coming from the Chiefs, number 67. We're very high on for the draft, number 74. He's playing left tackle now. He may not be in left tackle next year because doesn't have the ideal size, but he's kind of held up. Andrew Wiley's held up at right tackle. So that's been kind of the surprise of this offense, and why Cliff Kingsbury's got and Jaden Daniels have gotten off to a good start together, because their offensive line's held up. But now they don't run it all that well, though they ran it better last week. They don't run the ball particularly well. Austin Eckler, by the way, looked great last week. I don't worry about the run game. The Eagles' run defense is really good. And this is an offensive line. Again, I'm going to go the well again, Josh, and I know we may be talking again Friday. I still would be surprised, and I know Jaden Daniels has looked great with the run and pass. I'd be very surprised without Sam Cosmi that if the Eagles don't get pressure on him. I'd be very surprised.
Which leads me to my final question before I let you go, Adam. When you look at the Eagles, what they were able to do against the Rams and against the Packers, do the Washington Commanders have the tools to offset what the Eagles like to do, which is getting a pass rush without blitzing?
Right. They're a 4-man pressure group, as VicFangio says. When you can't get home with 4, you try to get home with 5. I just cannot see over the course of this game. Again, the weather right now should be clear and no rain, no precip, so we don't have to worry about guys sliding or moving around. They'll have the right cleats. So I can't imagine that the Eagles won't be able to do well with their 4-man pressure group. The way that Jalen Carter's playing, no defensive player in the playoffs is playing better than he is. He's been absolutely incredible. There's no question about it. Josh Sweat, by the way, talking to people this week around the league who've watched the Eagles tape, he looks really good. Nolan Smith is playing terrific football, playing with more power than he's ever shown. And Milt Williams, number 93, the Eagles' most unheralded and most underrated, and he's so good. As someone with one of the teams that the Eagles have played recently told me, Milt Williams is a guy that now you actually have to prepare for because the Eagles move him around a lot, and you got to be aware of him. And that front, to answer your question, Josh, I just see them winning, but the issue then for the Eagles is can they score, and that's obviously been the issue lately.
He's Adam Caplan at Caplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Check out Inside the Birds podcast. Like, download, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Adam, appreciate you jumping on, pinch hitting for Jeff today.
You got it. Thank you.